This is Inside the BFA, the official podcast of the Balloon Federation of America. Each episode of
Well, good evening, and let's try that again. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Nothing like live broadcasting. It seemed like we had a bit of a glitch with the opening there. But good evening and welcome to another episode of Inside the BFA, the podcast for the Balloon Federation of America. I'm Glenn Moore, your editor of the Ballooning Journal, the BFA's official publication. And tonight we're going to be delving into a very specific segment of our sport, and that is the world of home-built or amateur-built balloons. And I have two very distinguished and exciting guests this evening. Happy to have both of them join us. First of all, Mr. Paul Stumpf, who many of you will know as the owner-operator of the certified repair station, Stumpf Balloons. Paul specializes in fabricating, repairing, and inspecting, and of course, flying balloons. That's something he's been doing for about 49 years now. With regards to home building, Paul was exposed to this part of our sport at a very early age. He was a student in high school, a photographer at the time, when his art teacher was none other than a name many of you will recognize, especially those with interest in this segment of our sport. And that was, of course, Brian Boland. And that sort of sparked the passion for lighter than air in Paul, and he's continued with it ever since. In 1980, among his many accomplishments, Paul designed and built the world's first glass bottom basket that you could see through. And most recently, as we reported in Ballooning Journal, he was part of a two-man team that built the first hot air balloon ever made in Qatar, and that was during or Qatar, however you choose to pronounce it, and that was during the balloon festival there. I'm sure Paul can square me away on that pronunciation here in a moment. My other guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is Mike Emich, and Mike was inducted into the U.S. Ballooning Hall of Fame in 2023. He's a native of Akron, Ohio, which is of interest because he became enthralled with lighter than air when he was just a kid visiting the airship hangar there at the Akron Municipal Airport, which of course is home to the Goodyear blimps. He became a member of the Lighter Than Air Society at the age of 12, building and flying model balloons at that very early age. He built his first hot air balloon, a 21,000 cubic foot Tyvek balloon with a chair-style gondola in the mid-1970s. That balloon, named Casper, now resides at the National Balloon Museum in Indianola, Iowa. He's a founding member of the NOBPA, the Northeast Ohio Balloon Pilots Association, and in 1998 flew one of his own home-built balloons, an AX-5, to a world distance record, and followed that up the next year in a smaller AX-4 home-built, which he flew to another world distance record. He is also a founding member of the Aero Club of America of North Carolina, or chapter of North Carolina, and that is the first gas balloon club formed in the United States in 60 years. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. I'm dodging back and forth between my camera and my screen so I can see the two of you. Good to have you here this evening, and thanks for joining us for what we hope will be an exciting conversation. Let me get things started. A question that came up in one of the promotional posts that we had on social media. Paul, I'll throw this one to you to get us started. Do we call these things home builts? Do we call them amateur builts? Do we call them experimentals? What's the proper term?
Well, thanks for the intro, Glenn. It's hi, everybody. It's great to be here, share some of this vast experience and this all this that created a lot of this gray hair. So the proper nomenclature for it is depending on who you're talking to. If you're going to talk to the FAA, they're going to want to hear amateur built, experimental amateur built category. If you're talking among your peers, home built balloons, homemade balloons, DIY balloons, whatever you want to name it, but there's really only one place you're going to have to be careful about what you say, and that's working with the FAA and filling out your forms or getting the forms you need, which will be under experimental amateur built aircraft.
Okay. Well, I will endeavor to stick with that, but I'm sure I'll falter to home builds before the night gets too late into the evening. Deciding to build your own balloon is not a subject or not a decision I would think you come by very easily. And it's that classic, what could possibly go wrong, right? Um, Mike, what skills should one consider that he or she does have or does not have and should get before undertaking the decision to build your own balloon?
I think the most important thing you can do is to learn how to sew. And it sounds simple, but once you have an industrial sewing machine sitting in front of you that can sew 2,000 stitches an inch, it's pretty formidable piece of equipment. So you learn how to sew from someone experienced, and you can do it on a home sewing machine. My first balloon I built with a single needle Singer stylist that was my mom's. And I had another balloonist teach me how to sew one evening. But I learned all the parts of that sewing machine. I know what a presser foot is, the needle bar, you name it, you learn it, and you build on those skills before you jump into a very expensive industrial machine. So learn how to sew first. And then the second thing to go with that is to design a little project. It could be shot bags, little weight bags to hold your fabric down. It could be a little logbook case, anything you want to make, but make something, design it, make it on your own, and have an early success. So you go ahead into your project successful and feeling good about what's next in the adventure for you.
So to use a very bad analogy, then it's kind of like you got to crawl first, then learn to walk, and then learn to run as you go through this process.
But some people don't.
Yeah, I'd not completely agree with Mike on that. I basically did my first balloon on a Homebuilt on a single needle machine that was my mother's machine, and I had taught myself to sew while building my balloon. I was very proud of it, but when I took it to the FAA inspection, the inspector asked me if I had been drunk when I was sewing it. My seams were not very straight, but they held together. But yeah, so industrial machines can be intimidating, but there's also newer machines with speed controlled motors, which are fabulous. They can slow those machines down, and you can now make folders to help you make French fell seams very cheaply, whereas in the past you'd have to spend $400 or $500 to buy a custom-made folder to make a French fell seam. Now there's a 3D pattern online, I think that John Radowski put together. You can print your own folder and put that on your machine. So, and then there's no excuse, nothing like experience. And Mike alludes to, yeah, try to sew a few things. I sit people down at the machine that have never sewn, and I give them a whole big pile of scrap trimmings from old balloons and have them start sewing stuff. And yeah, you want to at least get to the point where you can stay fairly straight and have your seams hold together.
I have to admit, being a rather short person, I can't hem a pair of pants. And fortunately, I found a glue that you can now use, and all you have to do is fold the seam and glue it in place, and that works for me. They don't necessarily look very good, but they hold together. I suppose that's what's important. Yeah. What about other skills beyond? I mean, the sewing seems to be an obvious one. What about other skills that you should consider? Do you have them, or how do you go get them if you don't? That come into play when you're building your own balloon?
I'll start it off. I would.
Go ahead.
I'm a strong proponent of finding a mentor. There's my mentor being Brian Boland, and because of the internet and the number of years that people have been building balloons now, there's cells, for lack of a better word, of balloon builders all over the country now, and Canada. So I'm actually going to try to put together a list of get people to kind of volunteer their names and locations that have built balloons, and try to share that maybe on the Facebook page for the U.S. Experimental Balloon Builders page. But anyway, mentor, number one way to learn how to build, you observe, you are shown how to do something, you replicate, and just do that over and over again for each step of your project. And that's the simplest way to do it. Also, because of the internet, now you can also do stuff remotely. I make little phone videos showing people how to change the bobbins in the sewing machine, or how to troubleshoot a needle. Like Mike said, really important to learn about your machines, how to fix your machines, what to try to do and not try to do to your machines to mess them up. And you got to become an amateur sewing machine mechanic to really successfully do a balloon build without pulling all your hair out.
Yeah, the internet is a wonderful thing. I've managed to change the heating elements on my clothes dryer and made some repairs to my washing machine because of there's always a YouTube video. If you Google enough, you'll find a video that kind of shows you step by step how to do it. Mike, who is the typical home builder, amateur builder? Is there a profile, a type of person or balloonist who is typically that you find in this part of our community?
There's a wide variety of backgrounds, but some frustrated engineers, some retired engineers that never wanted to retire. Anybody interested in ballooning that they want a new skill, they want to try this, and it is it's a good winter project, especially in pollenized climate. We've got a long winter. It's something to keep you entertained, and you have a goal. I'm goal-oriented person, so working towards that final goal of the first inflation is always motivating. But geez, anybody. There's some very young people now building RCs, and they're already talking about building their first carrying balloon. So that's really great to see. We didn't see that before.
Well, and that's a little bit, as I understand from your bio, of how you got started. You started building and actually flying and competing with model balloons. Is that right?
Back in the late 60s, early 70s, but we made them out of tissue paper.
Yeah.
So some of my early ones didn't survive. So, but it was always exciting. That was through the Lighter Than Air Society. They had a program, and they had a model hot air balloon contest, and we would fly them and chase after them on foot. So very exciting.
Building RC balloons, great idea. Also, the people that want to build balloons, it crosses all boundaries. I've got people who've built balloons that saw a balloon festival as a child and dreamed about ballooning, and that was how they got into ballooning, by making their own balloons. And as Mike said, I've got engineering types. I've got other types of aviators that have built balloons, men, women of all ages, and skill sets. There's a lot of skills involved in making balloons. You asked initially, Glenn, what other skills you might need. How extensively you want to get involved in building a balloon system. You can weave baskets. You can get into welding and metalwork to make hoppers or basket frames. You can build aircraft cables and learn how to do that correctly. You learn various types of rigging and cord uses, how to combine different types of materials, webbing, load tapes, and different types of nylons and different weights of nylons. There's lots of different patterns of balloons that you can choose from. So you can get into design aspects, both aesthetically and mathematically. So lots of areas of things in balloon building, but none of it is difficult to attain. You can build a balloon in a couple hundred hours, whereas building any other kind of aircraft, you're probably looking at thousands of hours.
Years of time.
The nice thing about building a balloon is that you can then get it out of the building. I'm thinking of those stories where guys start building an airplane in their garage or their basement, and they get to a point where they realize, oh, hell, how am I going to get this thing out of here? You have to take down a wall or take off the garage door to get it out. I think the balloon we were looking at there a moment ago was, I believe that was Casper. Is that right, Mike?
It is. Your
tie-back balloon?
And Paul is very familiar with that shape. That was my first balloon built in the winter of 75, 76 on the single needle home sewing machine out of tie-back. I did not have a deflation port in that balloon. Just it was an inverted dump. The crown line was attached to the gondola, if you will, the chair, and we would release the envelope, and it would empty out through the mouth. And that was a true hopper. We had just a couple of plumber's torch tanks. That's a 10-gallon tank there. Same bottom end though, and it went through a lot of different transitions. But you can see the backrest there is an old wooden ironing board that was found on trash day, and then the seat is an old tractor seat, probably on the same day. But an old GM seat belt, and that's an old single can Raven burner from the late 60s, early 70s, and a 10-gallon tank in the back. But and it disappeared for like 30 years, and it wound up in an auction in Canton, Ohio. and then I reacquired it and then
Wow.
donated it to the museum.
Oh my gosh.
Did you
Well,
design
we're
that?
talking a
Say
little
again?
bit.
Did you design the pattern yourself, Mike?
No, that's Brian Boland.
That's a
pattern.
Boland. That's a Boland
Yeah.
design.
Okay.
There is. We can talk just real quick about patterns, because it can be overwhelming to try to figure out where to get a pattern or how to create a pattern.
Yes.
Most of my balloons, I'll be happy to admit, are actually derived from Aerostar gores, and you can take and you can get the Aerostar gore patterns online now. I think through Dave Sullivan, the parts supplier, has the manuals and all the pattern sheets online. So you can take a basic Aerostar gore pattern and redivide it into different panels. Aerostars were made with long vertical panels. Then nowadays, most balloons are made with horizontal panels, 15 or 12 or 15 horizontal panels, where you see some diagonal panels like in Firefly balloons. But you can start with a basic gore shape and then divide it up into any number of cuts or panels you want, depending on what your end goal is, to be the simplest thing to make or the craziest, most aesthetic thing to make. But there's also a guy up in Canada, Elaine Bard, who has been very, very instrumental in getting things computerized, which I can't do. Done. And he will put together pretty much any pattern for you, any size, any number of gores, any shape, for a modest fee, and send you paper panels, templates to cut your balloon out.
Oh,
So that's pretty cool stuff.
well, originally, I mentioned very early, Paul, your long friendship with the late Brian Boland, of course. And I can recall when I first got into the sport back in the late 70s, early 80s, seeing ads in Ballooning Journal at the time for Boland balloons. And correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Brian sell patterns at one time? Wasn't that a part of the business that he was doing?
Absolutely. He sold a plan book, how to build a balloon, that he published around 1974, 75. And for $20, you could buy this book, and it had everything. It had everything to build the balloon that Mike just showed, which was the same balloon that I built, a 20,000 cubic foot Tyvek balloon. And not only did it give you all the plans, but it gave you the sources for all the materials and everything. So it was a gold mine for $20 back in the day.
How to build a basket, how to make fuel lines, you name it. It was wonderful.
Yep.
Well, we just looked at the bottom end to Mike's early system, and that one of the things I want to get into are kind of hopscotching around some of the subjects I wanted to talk on. But talking about bottom ends, when I think of a home builder, I think primarily, or an amateur builder, I think of someone primarily building the balloon envelope. But certainly, the bottom end is a part of the system that you have to be thinking about and concerned about. How are you going to do that? And Paul, I think you have some unique examples that lead not only to the uniqueness of the bottom end, but also the transportability of home built balloons, amateur builds, and lightweight balloons in general. This first one, a bicycle and a tow rack, I guess, is that what that is?
That was a converted child carrier turned into a balloon trailer. And I wanted to build a balloon I could tow with a bicycle. I could tow it, but I'll tell you, I couldn't get very far. There's a lot of weight to pull, but it was a fun project. And that whole balloon system doesn't show the envelope sitting on top of the trailer, but I did plop the envelope behind the burner there. And it came in weighing about 140 pounds altogether without fuel. So manageable, but not super practical. But now with e-bikes, I don't know, I may have changed my mind about that. And then, so my goal in sort of reinventing balloons the second time around was to make the most lightweight and portable balloon possible. And I still don't think there's anything as portable as what I've put together for a duo hopper. This is an entire 54K duo hopper in the back of my Honda Element. And it's all soft construction except for the metal load ring and the plywood seat and the metal fuel tank, of course, in the burner. But basically, if you start building hoppers with metal framework and stuff, they get kind of large and bulky, difficult to get around. Almost sometimes more unmanageable than a basket. But so the thing you would ask about building the lower ends, also the beauty of building your own balloon is you can use any number of type certified components. You can use burners, you can use baskets, load rings from any of the manufactured balloons. As long as the FAA's line in the sand is you want to be able to lay claim on 51% of the project, right, to call it an experimental amateur build.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the FAA with regards to paperwork, getting I assume your balloon, even though it's experimental, it has to be inspected at some point by someone in order for
It
you to
does.
go fly it. Mike, tell me a little bit about what's involved in the paperwork part of home building, be it regulations, be it inspections, getting the balloon. I don't want to say type certified. They aren't type certified. I guess they're certified experimental, I would assume. But tell me a bit about that part of building your own balloon.
The first thing you need to do is start a builder's log, and just get a big 3-ring binder and start a log sheet of what you're doing. I start from the day that Elaine Bard's plans show up at my house, put the date and the time, and once I start trimming patterns, how much time that takes per day, maybe an hour per day, or whatever you want to, whatever you spend on it. Keep a log of everything you do, keep all your receipts, and photo document everything. Have someone take pictures of you cutting patterns, doing any calculations. Sometimes they could be staged, if you will. If you forgot to do it and you still have the patterns laying out, do it. But get a picture, because at least my FSDO, the FAA office, they want to see pictures of you doing something. They want to see pictures of me making cables, me at the sewing machine. And I always try and get a photo of me sewing the end number patch on the envelope, so they know that I'm working on that balloon that they're inspecting. Keep a neat log. Page protectors make it look great. They appreciate that, and they equate that with attention to detail in your balloon too. So keep all your documentation, receipts, what you spent, and it's quite easy to prove 51%. After that, there is an EAA publication that I'm going to recommend you get, or if a friend is in the EAA, they can get it for you. And I don't know if Fred's got a photo of that or not, but next one. That is an invaluable book, and it's you get a kit, you get a data plate with it, end number stencils, and a step-by-step exactly how to fill out each line of the documents you need to send to the FAA. And they're ready to find a mistake, and they couldn't find one in my paperwork. It's an absolute great resource. Get one, and it tells you how to send the letters, how to word the letters to the FAA for your inspection, and also how to apply for a repairman certificate. What that does, you definitely want to get one if you build your own balloon. So if you didn't build your own balloon, if Paul built it for you or I built it for you, you can't get the repairman certificate. I can only one person can have it, and it's only for one aircraft. But that repairman certificate allows you to sign off anything that you do to that balloon. Plus, it allows you to do the condition inspection, which is the annual inspection for an experimental aircraft. So I'm allowed to do it, and an A&P mechanic can do it, but no one else can do it. But interestingly, anybody else can work on that aircraft. They don't have to be an aircraft mechanic. It could be Joe the neighbor. But anybody can work on it. But when you do the condition inspection, or say if Paul does it, or the mechanic, they've got to trust your work, and they may not know your neighbor, and it may be shoddy workmanship. So you got to kind of walk the line there and have it done properly. Now,
is that repairman certificate the same as, for example, when I take my balloon, or when I used to take my balloons to say Balloon Repair of East Texas, or to Stumpf Balloons, to a certified repair station? Is that the same thing, or is it restricted to just the balloon that you have built?
It is only for that serial number, only for the balloon that you built.
So you could not work on my type certified balloon, for example, with that particular repairman certificate.
That is correct. I can't. It's only for that particular aircraft, and it does not follow the aircraft either. So if I sell it to someone in California, they don't get my repairman certificate. It always stays with me.
But that does
really
that
important to get, though.
Does that then, if you sold that balloon and then you built another, does that repairman certificate work for the new balloon you've built, or do you have to get a new certificate for that?
Another application. And it's a rather easy thing to do. It doesn't cost anything. but you should have your builder's log with you, especially with the turnover in the FAA. There's a lot of new people that don't know me. So they'll say, how do I know you built this? And how do I know you did 51%? So I go to an interview up in Cleveland with my book and all my documentation, and we start paging through it. And then once they get to a comfort level, then they get the paperwork out and hand me a temporary repairman certificate.
Maybe a simplistic question here, but if I built my own envelope and then I fly it attached to a type certified bottom, a cloud hopper, but a certified cloud hopper bottom end, does that qualify as 51%? Where's that line?
In my experience, they treat the envelope as at least 51%. And I don't know how you feel, Paul, but the envelope to the FAA is the balloon.
I would agree. That's considered the aircraft or the airframe. And one other point to Mike's, and that was great information, Mike. When you're getting certified, when you're building a balloon, you only have two options of getting it certified. One is the FAA, and one is working with the FAA through a DAR, which is a designated airworthiness representative. And so the FAA is required to issue your airworthiness certificate for free, no money, and your repairman certificate. But nailing down an FAA inspector these days is really, really hard. We can't even find any in our region that will do it. They just instantly refer us to go hire a DAR. DARs are not cheap. I did a survey a couple of years ago, and the average was $750 to $1,500 for this inspection.
Wow.
We luckily now have a guy in Connecticut, retired FAA DAR, who's doing it for $300, which is a heck of a deal in comparison. But that's going to take some work for your project in your area to figure out who you're going to be working with, the FAA or a DAR.
I'm fortunate here in Northeastern Ohio. I have the best FSDO around, and they use me as a training evolution. So they have new inspectors. No, the last balloon I did last fall, they brought 4 new inspectors down.
Yeah.
So I show them what they should be looking at.
So Mike,
go ahead.
Don't you actually work with a MIDO, not a FSDO for your?
Excuse me. Yeah, that is correct. And they don't even call it a MIDO anymore. It's
right.
Something else.
So there's the FSDO is can do it, but they have to be delegated by the MIDO.
MIDO office.
To allow them
Manufacturer and Inspection District Office,
right.
But it's something else now.
Well, no, but that was what it used to be. Yeah, the manufacturing, and those guys are responsible for certifying everything from balloons to airliners, so they can be hard to nail down.
So you guys will know more about this than I do, but I'm aware, of course, of Mike mentioned earlier that great resource book from the EAA, the Experimental Aircraft Association. But there is also the EBAA, the Experimental Balloon and Airship Association. And I know that it conducts the annual meeting that, of course, Brian Bowen started up in Post Mills. Tell me a little bit, I guess, Paul, I'll throw this one to you. Tell me a little bit about the EBAA. What has it done for the growth of home building or amateur building in the United States in particular? And what type of, how valuable a resource is that for people who want to get into building their own balloon?
EBAA was more of a facilitation of gathering balloon builders together.
Okay.
And it wasn't necessarily developed as a resource provider, although you could certainly go and work with Brian Bowen as a mentor. So EBAA was a way to promote experimental ballooning, aviation in general. And of course, he had the annual event at Post Mills, which we're still carrying on, which is great fun and a lot of cool stuff to look at and a great place to share ideas and knowledge. So I wish there was a core base of information available through the EBAA, but there isn't that I'm aware of. However, Jordan Long, Brian's protege, is still keeping Post Mills together with Brian's partner Tina, and it's an active and still a great little airport, grass strip airport for airplanes and gliders and balloons. And Jordan is very generous in offering his time to help people as a mentor to build balloons as well.
You mentioned earlier something about a Facebook page for builders.
Yeah, so the Facebook page is called U.S. Experimental Balloon Builders. And it's just it's anybody who wants to join it can. It's kind of a group chat source for asking questions or sharing information. So that's a great place to start. Get a membership on that page, and then can scroll back through years of stuff that's on there. Lots of pointers. Also, there's and I'm going to put a bunch of this stuff on through the YouTube video description section. I'll give Fred some addresses for a lot of these things we're talking about and websites. Right. There's also the Balloon Builders Journal, which is a compendium of information that was created. Help me with his name, Mike.
Bob Ledoux and Marie.
Bob Ledoux worked tirelessly for years publishing a newsletter about how to build balloons, and it's got, I think, pretty much everything there is in there, and it's available through a couple of different links. I think John Radowski has it on his website. Mm-hmm. Easily downloadable PDF, and you can spend hours just pouring through that stuff, and it covers everything from making patterns to fixing sewing machines and everything else. It's great.
It's very good.
Great document.
Well, building your own balloon sounds like a wonderful project. But balloonists are, if nothing, we are a community, and we love nothing more than taking our balloons to various festivals and showing them off and flying to the public and being the extroverts that so many of us are. If I build my own experimental balloon, can I register and fly it at your typical balloon festival rally, or are there restrictions that apply to that balloon that maybe would not if I take a type certified balloon to that event? Mike, I'll toss that one to you. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, you can. You can fly it pretty much at any event that a type certified balloon can fly at. We can't fly for hire. We don't take paid passengers. So, and most events don't allow that anyways anymore. Some of the sanctioned racing events, there are quite a few experimentals flying these days at the events, and the FAA, we go through the same FAA inspection at the beginning, all of our paperwork, logbooks, operating limitations, and they don't bat an eye. They don't care. We have our own operating limitations to follow, which are almost the same as a type certified balloon, except the compensation. So
are you able to, so many events require you to fly a sponsor often. Are you able to do that?
Sure, because we don't have to fly them. There's not a requirement to attend that rally to fly a sponsor. If we don't fly, we don't fly. It is pilot discretion. And if the weather is inclement or they're not, the sponsor's not paying for the ride. They're paying to have their name at that event, and they're paying to help defray the costs of the event. So that was all gone through by the BFA too.
Yeah, I was just thinking though, there are still events that that offer sponsors a ride as a part of their sponsorship. And if everybody else, if the weather's beautiful and everybody else is flying, and I'm there with my experimental home-built balloon, can I turn to the sponsor and say, or do I have to turn to the sponsor and say, sorry, I can't fly you because I have an experimental balloon, or can I fly them just like I would any other non-paying passenger?
I fly them like any other non-paying passenger.
Okay.
I would agree. One other, I won't get too far into this, but that getting insurance and going to balloon festivals requires an N-numbered aircraft. Mm-hmm. And you can build your own ultralight hot air balloon.
Oh, yes.
So it's another whole section of this conversation. But those would not be allowed, at a balloon festival, and you can't buy insurance for them.
Okay. Getting close to time to wrap things up. One of the questions that I we skipped over as we got going very early on. What is the attraction? You guys have both built multiple home-built balloons. You've taught people how to build balloons. I've never done that. I've never had the desire to get into that part of the sport. So I'm kind of curious, what is the attraction? What's the benefit? What's the thrill? What's the adrenaline, driver in building your own balloon?
I'll let Paul go first.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I should have tossed that. We'll let Paul start, and then Mike, you follow up.
Okay.
Depends on your personality, I guess. For me, as an artist, my drive and my inspiration is the design and executing these these amazing geometrical flying fabric patterns, and having the surprise and joy of seeing that thing inflated the first time, because you build a balloon and you're sewing for hundreds of hours and you never see it. So until it's finished, and then you put the air in and you're like, wow, okay, that's exciting, and makes you want to do it again and again.
Well, at some point you have to get out so you can see it, right? Otherwise,
Right.
you're underneath. You can only look up into it.
Pretty good view looking up the inside, but yeah, you want to see it.
I've seen a number of the ones you've built, and some of the patterns are just exquisite. They really are. Mike, your answer to that same question: what's the thrill? What drives you?
I come from more of a historical, especially growing up in Akron, historical lighter than air background, engineering, and just general aviation. So it's something I can fly in. But I got started early because it's the only way I could afford to get a balloon is to build one out of Tyvek on a home sewing machine. And then it seemed like a lot of money. But it like Paul said, I'm not the artist that he is, but you can make anything you want, any shape, any cubic feet of volume, any colors, if you can get the colors. Sometimes getting fabric is difficult. So you make do with what you have, what colors you have, and come up with a pattern. And the first inflation is always very exciting, especially when you build in my small space. I have a 12 by 18 foot building area in my basement. So things get lost, like shot bags, hemostats, lots of thread,
dog toys.
And then, so I don't invite a lot of people out at the first inflation, because all of these things come out of the mouth. So, but it's just a really a cool experience.
Your comment about using the fabric that you have takes me back to when I was marketing director at Thunder and Colt, and we made a deal one year with the Balloon Fiesta out in Albuquerque to provide a hot air balloon as one of the, I think, 3 different manufacturers all provided balloons as part of our booth rental fee and whatnot. And they said, we don't care what color it is, just, as long as it's a good flyable. And we had, I think, some purple and some kind of a flesh colored, god awful looking fabric, and built this balloon out of it. And if I remember right, Owen Keown may have won it that year. This was back in the 1990s, but it had to be the ugliest hot air balloon that I've ever seen. But we used a lot of fabric that we had extra. So I can relate to what you're saying there. Mike,
one of my favorite stories in that vein is one of the builders, I think Roland Escher, wanted to build a solid pink balloon, but he ran out of pink, and he had to put one yellow gore in the balloon. So he aptly named the balloon "Ran Out of Pink."
That works. That's something we didn't touch on really specifically, but I'll give each of you a quick chance to answer it before we wrap up here. A 3-part question. And I know this varies balloon to balloon to balloon to balloon, so there's no specific answer, but ballpark it. What's the cost involved? What's the time involved? And what kind of space do you need? And Paul, I'll let you go first on that one.
Okay, like Mike alluded to, you can build a balloon in your apartment. However, for cutting the balloon out, it's nice to have a 10 or 20 foot long table, which you can build temporarily or go use one at somebody's repair station if they're generous enough to help you do that. So if you can cut a balloon out on a 20-foot table, 2 guys can probably cut a balloon out in a day and a half. If you're going to basement panel by panel by panel, it could take you 100 hours. So cost wise, I always tell people you're looking to spend about $9,000 to $15,000 depending on what you're getting for fabric and prices and stuff and what you're building. And hours wise, for an envelope, I estimate 200 hours of construction time. Then lower ends, it's anything goes. You could spend buy a lower end, or you could spend another several hundred hours building a lower end. Mike, you have anything to add to that?
I'm a scrounger on fabric. When I see it, I tell my wife it's catch of the day. She says, "You don't need that fabric." I said, "Well, I'm going to need it, or somebody's going to need it." So if somebody's got some for sale, I don't care what color it is. If it's a silicone fabric or even a calendar fabric, I'll grab it and keep it, and then use it for a future project. But I'm going to estimate just a little bit lower than Paul on fabric, unless you look for specific colors, and then that's where it gets pricey, because you got to find first quality material. I use seconds, so this next balloon's got a lot of black in it, and then other colors mixed in. But bottom end, I built 6 baskets, several fold-ups, Brian Boland style fold-ups, and I added my own tweaks to them. As a matter of fact, I went to over 20,000 feet in one of those, a 30 by 40 basket fold-up. And those are pretty inexpensive to build. You can get aluminum U-channel and tubing and a lot of that stuff from McMaster Carr. And you can build this at home if you're a hands-on hand tool guy. You can build that basket safe, and it's safe too. But as far as bottom ends, like Paul said, if you can find a used Cameron bottom end, Lindstrom, whatever you find, that's probably going to cost you as much as the envelope. In my idea of it.
Okay.
Yeah, my figure was for a full system. And just to talk about fabric for a minute, because it's one of the most common questions we get asked. Where do you get fabric? There's no easy answer. The history of fabric is most balloons were made from 1.9 ounce ripstop nylon. It was pretty much widely available. Still is. But most home builders don't want heavy balloons. They don't want to build a 200 pound or 300 pound balloon.
Sure.
So we have been using this fabric called Sourcoat, which is a fabric manufacturer for the sport parachute industry. It's been around for many years, since the 90s. Most successful fabric ever made, increased the life of sport parachutes 3 times. They also, same company, engineered and built Aerostar's diamond weave fabric. So great company, great material, great fabric. They don't want us using their fabric seconds in hot air balloons. They would cringe if we tried to buy fabric from them and told them we were going to put it in a hot air balloon. But they have sold their fabric for their firsts for use in Aerostar balloons and other balloons. But so you can find these lightweight 1.3 ounce or 1.1 ounce, might be called a fabric calendared. Calendared is another type of fabric that is less porous without a coating per se. And then the little bit heavier 1.3 silicone coated fabric is the cat's meow. It's light, it's incredibly airtight, it's resistant to moisture, no issues whatsoever. It lasts for years and years and years. Good UV resistance. And as Mike said, balloon builders are kind of fabric hoarders. So when we see a deal, grab it. So my recommendation is, when you're shopping for fabric, start calling balloon builders and saying, "Have you got anything to get rid of?"
We'll trade back and forth.
But they might
Glenn,
get you in on a good deal that somebody just found. Like we lucked into a deal last year where we were able to buy 15,000 yards of Sourcoat seconds for 55 cents a yard. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
Never see that again. But so yeah, there's fabric. You can go to a company called Westmark in Connecticut, which also does not want to sell their fabric for use in hot air balloons. But as a comparative price example, their lightweight fabric is almost $18 a yard for first, and they don't sell seconds. So Sourcoat seconds is what you're looking for, or a calendared fabric 1.1 seconds also. It's out there. It comes and goes. Stay in touch.
And Glenn, back to my original comment, you can also, another source is those people that bought a bunch of fabric, a new sewing machine, before they learned how to sew. So then they give up, and then you buy their fabric.
True.
There you go. That's the old "what could possibly go wrong" story, and you find that person and make a deal. Gentlemen, it's been a thrill. I'd love to keep this conversation going on for quite some time. I know we've barely touched the surface of amateur balloon building. But before we go, both of you, I know, have vast experience, not only building, but flying your own balloons. I'd really like to hear from each of you what your most memorable experience has been in one of your personally built balloons. Mike, I'll let you take the ball first, and then Paul, I'll let you wrap it up.
If I could ask Fred to bring up the picture of the balloon with the antennas hanging below it. I built a 68,000 cubic foot racer 2014. And then I participated in the FAI Gold Badge program, or FAI Sporting Badge program. Mm-hmm. So that's my gold badge for altitude right there. I went to 22,200 in a 68,000 balloon that I built with a Boland style basket and a bicycle rim load ring and T3 burner and 410 gallon tanks.
That's fantastic.
Paul?
When I took my original Tyvek balloon to 5,000 feet to get my commercial certification, and then realized about 20 years later that the tear strength on that fabric had been around. still alive and here to talk about it. But my favorite flight, and Fred, you may be able to find the waterfall picture that I sent. It's okay if you can't find it, but I'm a little lower flyer than Mike. And it took me 5 years, but I eventually, we fly the Letchworth Gorge out in Western Europe with a 110-foot waterfall. And I tried for 5 years to get down that river and go off the edge of that waterfall with my boots in the water from my hopper. Wow. Finally did that. So that's my
Well, I think we had that picture, Paul, in the story we did in Ballooning Journal, and I think it was in the promo that I put together to promote this upcoming issue. So some folks have probably seen it, of your balloon over the waterfall there. As I said, gentlemen, both of you, thanks so much. It's great to see and talk with both of you. I wish we could continue this for a couple of hours. I know we've barely touched in the depth, really just kind of dangled our toes in the water of home-built ballooning, but hopefully it's maybe given some food for thought to those who are watching and maybe thinking that this might be something they'd like to get into. As Paul mentioned, and I'm sure Mike will do the same, they'll add some resources for you to the description page of this when we archive it on our YouTube channel. And so look forward to that. And I'm sure, I don't want to speak for the two of you, but I'm guessing that if people want to reach out to either of you, I'm sure that you're willing to share and help and point people in the right direction for things if need be.
Absolutely.
So,
sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you again, Paul. Mike, thanks so much for being with us tonight. We hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Hope that it's given you some insight into the world of building your own balloon, the good, the bad, the ugly, and as I said earlier, what could possibly go wrong. We will see you again next month with another edition of Inside the BFA. Until then, fly safe, everybody, and keep the crown line, or the crown at least, up at the top. Have a good evening, and we'll see you again soon. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for viewing this episode of Inside the BFA. Membership in the Balloon Federation of America is your entry into the sport of ballooning, whether you're a pilot, crew, or an enthusiast. Everyone is welcome inside the BFA. For more information, see our website at www.bfa.net.